Well, hello, Year 11. And you're approaching the revision session, aren't you, for your IGCSE? And there's the set text poems to cover. So what I'd like to do is go through and give you a synopsis of each one. It might be a bit like a John Green crash course, John Rees crash course, but it's just like a prelude, right? It's a way while we're online, hopefully coming back soon, but allowing you a means that you can get into the poems and like just see them all together in one place. And you can stop and pause. You can have a look at the poems. You can have a look at your resources about the poem before you begin. Very good, I think, to have the poems in front of you, making like handwritten notes even better. And if you hear me like delaying and pausing, it's because of that idea of having the poems on screen, I suppose, which is, so it's not quite as immersive, I think, as when you've got that pen to paper, the full kind of engagement of body and mind. So what I'm going to do is turn this over to the poems. I'm going to give you 5 minutes on each of the poems, and we'll see how we go. Now, on the right-hand side, I have put, these are the key things. I think you're always going to look at these kinds of things, and especially in a timed exam. Well, there are more poetic aspects that you can look towards, but realistically, how many are you going to get to? And I think that this will give you plenty to consider and to begin your analysis. So I might speak to some of these key ideas as I go through, but of course you can use color coding, underlining, annotations in your poetry booklets. Hopefully you collect those from school and get into it that way, expand the ideas and start to get some of these key quotations like up on the fridge, on the bathroom mirror, like, start to immerse yourself, have these visual clues up and around so they occupy your reverie. Okay, so I'm going to begin. There's no reason to look at these chronologically, but in one of the poetry context resources that we've been looking at, I kind of found that useful for looking at these in terms of like the romantic period. So the first few come from there, and I'll go through and I'll post like when the pauses begin and take you through, and I'm going to try set a 5-minute timer and see how we go. Okay, 5 minutes. The Old Familiar Faces by Charles Lamb. He is of the Romantic era. Unlike people such as Percy, Bysshe, Shelley, Bysshe, don't know. Bysshe. Unlike them, Charles Lamb's poetry is focusing here not really on nature, but more of the familiar faces of people he knows, family, friends, lovers who've been and gone across the years, his late night carousing, drinking partners, his kind of friends, people from his childhood. I think we can all identify or empathize with that, can't we? Like, because we've been not able to travel and go back and see our friends and our family from across the waters or across the borders. So the Old Familiar Faces, I get this sense, this is a poem written in the 1800s or 1800s. Check that out. And I think what he's doing here, he's looking back in time. So this is a speaker who's very nostalgic, and there's a sense of loss, a sense of regret, I think, here. I have had playmates, I have had companions, but where are they now? So it's maybe someone who's older, looking back, contemplative, and remembering a period of his life which was happy, but now seems lost and forlorn and forgotten. I have been drinking, I have been carousing. Is it speaking in a more recent past tense there? I don't know what the technical name for the have been is. But that it's like he's just been doing that like quite recently. Maybe he's been wasting his time. Maybe it's someone like going through a bit of a crisis and realizing that these good times won't stay around forever. Drinking late, sitting late, someone who's listing things now. There's a little bit of repetition there. We can see that across the course of these 7 stanzas, he deals with various aspects like friends, childhood friends, a woman he once loved, the fairest amongst women. And maybe is this a reason that he's been laughing, or sorry, he's been drinking late, thinking about loves that have been lost to him. This is more hopeful, isn't it? In the 4th stanza, I have a friend. There's a shift to the present tense. A kind of friend has no man. Like an ingrate, I left my friend abruptly. So even those close to him, he's had fallings out with throughout his life. So perhaps there's something rather like sad about this person. Is it Charles Lamb, or is it a persona, a speaker who is a creation of the poet? Charles Lamb did like to sit in the pubs of London, carousing with friends, having big dinner parties. He was a very social man, apparently. So there's kind of sense of this loss here, ghost-like. I paced around the haunts of my childhood. And there are these images here, the imagery, earth seemed a desert. So he's using figurative language and language of feeling haunted by these memories, so that the world in which he lives, either like physically or in his memory, seems scorched and bleak and sad and barren. So an emotional desert, possibly. What seems to occupy him most, though, this friend. It's this, that it's like this friend, more than a brother, more than anyone else, is what he is spending his time dwelling on. And it's that breakdown of a relationship with an old familiar friend that seems to be causing him more heartache and anything else. How some have died, some they have left me, and some are taken from me. All are departed. Oh, all are gone. The old familiar faces. So lots of repetitions of this refrain that kind of add to it the melancholic quality of the poem. All are gone. Use of caesura within the line to really heighten the plaintive lament within that. So yeah, just towards the end of my 5 minutes, those are some of the key things I'd look to there. And that is the old familiar faces. Moving on now. Song to the Men of England. You've seen this before a couple of times in your mocks. There's my timer. Yep. So a key romantic poetic figure, someone who was actually expelled from Oxford University for writing a treatise against God, like about atheism. So he's someone who's from the ranks of the elite, academically, but also could afford to go to university. So he's not like our other poets like Hone to Ware or John Clare, who were from like the working class or farming rural stock. So he was highly educated, a member of the elite, but this romantic soul dreamed of like liberty and equality for all. These are liberté, égalité, fraternity. These are ideas that are born out of the French Revolution, which had occurred just, I think, within the decade before he's writing this. So he's a young man. He died young as well. So his spirit was stirred by the idea of social equality. And at the time he's writing, it's the Industrial Revolution. With that, now it's even more pronounced, the inequalities between the rich and the poor. So in this feudal economy, previously, the elites were the landowning nobility, the aristocracy, the landowners, the clergy, the church. In the Industrial Revolution, great financial power starts to be held in the hands of those who have the means of production. So they are the factory owners. And we can see references here to the landowners and the factory owners, who, when we have references to the plows and then the forgers. So if you think about the the communist symbol, which is on the Chinese flag. You have this, you have the sickle, which represents the workers, and the hammer, which represents the workers. Now, we've covered this in some detail before, but I think, the voice and speaker is a rallying call, a cry to those people to stand up, to gain control, to retake control. And he points out, using a lot of rhetorical flourishes, the kind of injustices that these people have to endure. Wherefore weave with toil and care the rich robes your tyrants wear. So the language here is very condemnatory of the tyrants, the ungrateful drones, the stingless drones. He kind of makes he's using animalistic metaphors, but he's also like a bit like a stingless drone, saying that they're kind of effeminate compared to the bees of England. So a drone is a type of bee, a worker drone. But the bees of England, which is capitalized as well, a clue that he sees the bees who are the workers, and the bee is the symbol of Manchester. Manchester was one of the epicenters of the Industrial Revolution. And if you go to the town hall, there are like emblems of the bee all over Manchester town hall. And this was the scene of one of the massacres, St. Peterloo massacre. So like there is revolution within the air. Now, he builds like rhetorical arguments here. There are these in this stanza, we can see the use of caesura, the use of parallel phrasing. The seed ye sow, another reaps. The wealth ye find, another keeps. The robes ye weave, another wears. The arms ye forge, another bears. So there, again and again and again and again, we can see these injustices, and it has the effect of them, the injustices being heaped up, and the sense of an unfair world being made more apparent by the poet here. I think, though, it's not just like a strident call to arms and then a kind of rhetorical argument that's being built. He also uses a different tone of voice at the end. He maybe uses emotional blackmail here in a sense, like shrink to your cellars, holds and cells. Like maybe is he calling them cowards there? He points out that they build the homes and have to live in very reduced circumstances. And here he warns them, you be careful, because with plough and spade and hoe and loom, use of polysyndeton to add to the increasing effect of wherever you can see this occurring, there's injustice all over Britain, in the farms, in the factories. You will trace your grave and build your tomb and weave your winding sheets. That's the embalming robe when you put someone into a coffin, till fair England be your sepulchre, your tomb. So there's a really stark warning at the end of that poem. Okay, that's my 5 minutes. Moving on, First Love by John Clare. This is one of our 3 stanza poems. There's a few poems which are quite short, so hopefully that helps you remember them. John Clare, a rural son of rural workers, again a romantic poet. He's romantic and he's moved. He's a lyric poet and he's moved by nature, and he's moved in this scene of beauty as well. First love, there it is. Some of these poems are hard to maybe understand. First love, it's there in the title. That's what this poem's about. First love. I ne'er was struck before that hour with love so sudden and so sweet. Her face, it bloomed like a sweet flower and stole my heart away complete. That kind of rhyming, those rhyming couplets there, and that opening 4-line quatrain from the first stanza is something you might be able to consign to memory. Then you'll have lots of things to work from, such as the imagery, the use of a figurative device, a simile, blooming like a sweet flower. So this is like a young love. It's his first love. He's a young man. And then we can all probably relate to this as well, when you see that person who makes you feel so special, and you get clammy and you can't speak, and so he's remembering that actually, like, he has all these vivid sensory feelings as the emotions overwhelm him. My face turned pale, as deadly pale. My legs refused to walk away. And when she looked, what could I ail? My life and all seemed turned to clay. So there's this light, quite playful humor here of he remembers the kind of shock of him being an innocent, young, naive man experiencing these emotions for the first time. He has this kind of like euphoric, kind of almost like transcendental, that's transcendental encounter, like a movement, a surging, a soaring of the spirit. That's a very kind of romantic tradition. When Wordsworth sees his daffodils, he also is moved by this incredible beauty. And it seems here he almost has experienced as something that's like a hallucination, or like such an overwhelming rush of the spirits. He becomes lightheaded. The trees and bushes around the place seem midnight at noonday. It's like the color has been scorched and bleached out of it. A little bit like his face turns deadly pale. So it's like his heart can't pump the blood to his senses. So he's starting to feel lightheaded and giddy. I could not see a single thing, words from my eyes did start. They spoke as chords do from the string, and blood burnt round my heart. So there's that use of alliteration, the blood burnt round my heart. Can you hear the pulsing, the heightened pulsing and intensity? So although the structure of the poem is the same, the use of the language here is doing different things to the iambic meter. And the iambic meter, what is it? It's the unstressed and stressed syllable, those little iambic feet that operate within the line, which are boom, 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 the beating of the heart. And so he says towards the end, the final stanza, are flowers the winter's choice? Is love's bed always snow? She seemed to hear my silent voice, not love's appeals to know. I never saw so sweet a face as that I stood before. My heart has left its dwelling place and can return no more. So it's a very lovely lyric poem by a man remembering his first love. And I believe that this is kind of an autobiographical poem. Apparently John Clare's other poems, he has this childhood sweetheart, a first love, and his wife. I think that those two are I don't know how happy his wife was about all these poems to his true first love, but there we are. What might appear to be perhaps cliche now, my heart has left its dwelling place and can return no more. But this is the first time these words have been written in the romantic tradition by John Clare. So I think that their kind of purity of the language, the innocence of the experience, the vivid sensory experiences as well make this poem quite unique and a nice one to study. And you can maybe remember like the bleakness of winter as a framing device. So bleak, emotionally barren landscapes, the winter. Now is the winter of my discontent, compared to the flourishing of spring as it is now outside. All the birds are singing and the flowers are blooming. That's 5 minutes. Okay, Dover Beach by Matthew Arnold. This is probably one of the most philosophically deep poems that you will experience, that you will encounter within this, because yes, this is a poem about love. Also, he's speaking to his love. The setting is Dover Beach. It's on the cliffs of the White Cliffs of Dover. Very dramatic, very romantic setting. Matthew Arnold, I believe that he's writing the kind of Victorian era now. So this is like the mid 1800s. And the key thing here is the Sea of Faith. Now, when I was putting this together, I wanted to put it on the screen so I could just read it to you and you can make your own notes as we go along. But of course, I had to, this is a longer poem, right? So I had to split it in two. Looking at like where I make that split is kind of a useful thing. It's useful for you to really see that there are key like pivots and turning devices in the tone and the language and the ideas. So in the first opening moments, this is like the exposition. And to be honest, this could appear to be like a typical romantic love poem. But over here, we go back into antiquity, into the classics and the Greek tragedist Sophocles, who hears something out there on the breeze, on the wind, on the sea in the dead of night. And what is he listening for? The same thing as Matthew Arnold or Matthew Arnold's persona. I believe this is autobiographical. I believe that this was written during the time of his honeymoon, as they stay in this little cottage above the hills. I can imagine a quaint little cottage, at the foot of a lighthouse potentially. And he's actually, it shifts significantly here from this very traditional romantic poetry. Comes to the window, sweet as the night air. We've got the lights on the moonlit night, and the sea there, all very romantic. The sea of faith, though, so that's the Christian faith, was once too at the fore, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. Furled is like a sail, furled, like girdle is a belt. I'm not quite sure what that means actually, but I get the impression of like the sea of faith, a ship upon the sea of faith with the wind in its full sails, meaning that there is this profound, widespread belief in Christian faith. Yet now he hears its melancholy, long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind down the vast edges drear and naked shingles of the world. Now, that's interesting there. I'm kind of expecting a rhyming pattern, but it doesn't really happen. I think that naked shingles of the world, shingles, that soft, it's a sibilant sound. The shingles are what gets washed up on the beach. It's like the stones or the pebbles or shingles. I think shingles is the like the driftwood that's left there. So rather than like the bark, the frame of a great big ship of faith upon the high seas of faith, we've now got, it's kind of like it's been shattered and broken. So there's another effect. It's not just a sea of faith, it's the ship itself that's lying shipwrecked. And the disruption of the rhyme scheme there, I think, highlights the fact that it's more of a world in crisis. The use of his language is very much onomatopoeic in some sense, and also the lineation of these lines. We can hear like the sea's movement come back and forth. You can see it on the page, right? You can see the waves come in and the waves go out, and the waves come in and the waves go out. Retreating to the breath is a shorter line than the withdrawing roar. So the sea of faith, the withdrawing roar, that is kind of onomatopoeic. It is the use of like personification. There's an anger, there's a desolation here. Our love, let us be true to one another, for the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams hath really neither joy nor love nor light. Well, this is quite an intense way to speak to your love. At the beginning, it's a different thing. So really the speaker here undergoes a dramatic shift in tone and becomes much more introspective, and is worried about a landscape here that's darkling, a land confused, alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. So the ignorance and the chaos, the void that is left when faith has been disrupted is, you really sense the crisis in Arnold's voice at this moment. Okay. Lots to do with that poem. Good, a shorter one. 4 stanzas, 4 lines in each stanza. Irregular lineation though. So I look here for the patterns. This is a shift, isn't it? At the end, must be a lot of meaning there. Let's get to it. The Voice by Thomas Hardy. Woman much missed, how you call to me, call to me. There's an echo, it's a voice that appears and comes back in the echo, saying that now you are not as you were, when you had changed from the one who was all to me. We might be expecting all to me again. You might be expecting the repetition of that phrase, but now it appears singularly. And so we have this idea of a voice already getting quieter. And that the voice is the woman's voice, right? Of the woman that he loves, something somewhat similar to both Charles Lamb and John Clare, remembering fondly an old familiar loved one. But when our day was fair, our day was fair, past tense, fair meaning good and beautiful, and like, so this is a nostalgic poem. Again, it's an older poet reflecting back upon their youth perhaps, And he asks, can it be you that I hear? So he's speaking to a voice, but the voice, he's not even sure if it's there. So let me view you then, standing as when I drew near the town, like when she was most beautiful to him. He remembers now this vivid impression of her in her air blue gown, waiting for him. But it's a voice, remember, it's a voice. And he's not sure if it's her voice at all, and here it's pivotal. Look for these connectives. This is a contrasting connective that, or is it only the breeze? And here, right, we had this rising euphoric memory and a vivid experience, but then it's the breeze, it's listlessness, traveling across the wet mead. I feel that's a wet field. All of a sudden there's a dankness, a quietening, a kind of chill in the air, as she is dissolved to one listlessness, dissolved like an apparition. She disappears in front of his eyes. Is this a voice? Is it a haunting voice? Is it a memory? But it's retreating, it's becoming quieter and less distinct. So he doesn't know if it's real or her or a memory, or can he remember it distinctly, because our memories do become more vague across time. Heard no more again, far or near. An introspective poet now, a voice that's worried that he will never hear her voice again. So it might be someone who's loved him and he's lost her, she maybe has traveled, someone who's gone overseas, or someone that has potentially died, and then he doesn't have a phone, he doesn't have video of her voice, no TikTok. He just has his memories, and those become, as he's getting older, those becoming more indistinct. And here we can see the stanzas, the development. There's a passage of time, and he says, thus I, alone. He's alone, a singular pronoun that is stopped and made to feel so alone because of the use of the semicolon, faltering forward. Well, could be old age, right? We don't move, when we're young, it like move nice and fluidly and spring up and joyful and playful, but now it's faltering forward, and we get this stuttering hesitation as an old man walking potentially, and using pathetic fallacy, using nature and the seasons as a retreat into old age, the leaves around me falling. Now he's in an autumnal time of his life, the wind oozing thin. This is a rather disgusting image, like oozing thin. Wind oozing doesn't really do that. It's an unusual verb choice there to describe the quality of the wind, but then maybe this is kind of like a ghostly tale, a phantasmagorical impression of the thorn from Norwood and the woman calling, and now we're left bleak, desolated, isolated, alone, and it seems to be that he'll never recover the memory of that voice. Okay, so at this stage, having covered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, try and get through 2 more. The Listeners by Walter Delamere. Is there anybody there? Said the traveller. What a direct voice, a voice that echoes out into the silence of the first line. Knocking on the moonlit door, and his horse in the silence champed the grasses of the forest's ferny floor. Well, we have this kind of archaic language. It's like a horror story, really. It's got all of that kind of archetypal things of a traveller alone, a moonlit night, a horse, silence, creates a very intense, unsettling, spooky atmosphere. A bird flew up from the turret, shocked and startled because we're listening and we're keen and it's silent, and all of a sudden there's a disruption. So there's little peaks of tension within this. Now he doesn't knock anymore. He smote upon the door a second time. Is there anybody there? He said. So very mysterious. Why is he there? Who does he want to speak to at this moonlit hour? But no one descended to the traveller. So we have a haunting image here. No head from the leaf-fringed hill leaned over and looked into his grey eyes. His grey eyes. Grey because it's nighttime. because the color's been sapped out, or gray because maybe he's seen too much, like it's a reflection of his soul, and he's haunted and frightened, and like he feels bleak and world weary. He stood perplexed and still. Now I've chosen here, haven't I? You see that full stop that really adds the sense of the silence and him being alone. And we have again this key connective. It's like that idea of the pivot, but only a host of phantom listeners. The title here, the listeners, are phantoms. This is a ghost poem. They dwelt in the lone house then, stood listening in the quiet of the moonlight to that voice from the world of men. Very evocative, and hopefully that rhyme scheme can help you remember some of these key lines. But you can remember vividly, like you could talk about aspects of the moonlight, a lone voice, the quietness, the darkness, and very eerie, the fact that they're listening. Oh, well, he's listening, isn't he? And they're listening. But apart from that, there's a silence, and they're right on the other side of the door. So that's really unsettling and spooky. Imagine if you were there and there was a host of ghosts just moments away. I'm starting to get goosebumps just thinking about it. They stood thronging. So he speaks from the world of men, but these people are dead. They're thronging. You get a throng, it's a crowd, a group of people. There's many of them. What's happened here? Why are there so many dead people on the dark stair all together? And they're silent again, hearkening, listening in an air stirred and shaken by the lonely traveller's call. They're mute. Can they not speak? They're ghosts. Are ghosts real? Like their stillness answers his cry while his horse moved, cropping the dark turf. 'Neath the starred and leafy sky, for he suddenly smote upon the door even louder and lifted his head. "Tell them I came," and no one answered. "I kept my word," he said. So we have a story, we have a whole narrative here. A man desperate to keep his word returns to the place where there seems to have been a massacre, a butcher. Maybe there was a battle, he came too late, he wasn't able to support them, and he knows that they're dead, but never the least stir made the listeners, though every word he spake fell echoing through the shadowiness of the still house from the one man left awake. Aye, they heard his foot upon the stirrup and the sound of iron on stone, and how the silence surged softly backward when the plunging hooves were gone. So as the meter here is the horse's hooves cantering to dugga-dugga. Yeah, the cantering of the horse's hooves into the silence, and we're left again with silence descending and the mystery unsolved. So it's it uses lots of sibilants here, lots of onomatopoeic qualities, the sound of iron on stone, harsh, distant sounds disrupting the violence and adding to that sense of echoing into the silences. Okay. And for the first half, 7 poems, 5 minutes each. This is The Flower-Fed Buffaloes by Vachel, Lindsay. So all of the poets, I believe, until this point are British. We've got an American. And America's story is, America is in the ascendancy as a nation at this time. Early 20th century now. And it might be late 1800s, early 1900s, but it's kind of like the turning point of the 19th to 20th centuries. And why that's important is because we start to see, we use like that metaphor, again, the spring, the perfumed grass, the wheat. So we have the idea of like the summer and the seasons and the passing of time again. But we also have this real rise and surge of technology. The locomotives are evidence of modernity. So these locomotive engines sing. Well, that's a positive quality, isn't it? It means that they've got this kind of joyful aspect to them. Yet the thing is, how the West was won. So that the settlers, the pilgrims first arriving, establishing a Western European settlement in the 1600s. And they've landed in indigenous lands, the First Nations people there. We have the Blackfeet, the Pawnees, other groups like the Apaches. There were countless, not countless, well, there were many different groups. The Blackfeet and Pawnees were just two of the indigenous First Nations people there at the time. Now, if you've seen The Revenant with Leonardo DiCaprio, there's an incredible image of him that's taken when they do the historical context of the film. You can see one lone pioneersman, and he stood against a mountain of buffalo skulls. And nature was like plundered for its bounty. If you've seen like the very famous scene in Dances with Wolves, the shock and disgust that Kevin Costner's character has when he sees that these Western pioneersmen slaughter buffaloes by the tens, hundreds of thousands. They were once huge herds of these roaming all over what is now known as America, and were killed just for some meat. But the Blackfeet and Pawnees' relationship with nature was much more symbiotic. They used all the parts of the animal, like the skins for the wigwams, and the bones for tools, axe handles, and every part of it was eaten and consumed. And there was a much more harmonious relationship with nature. So here, I think this is a short poem, but there's a real sadness of the idea of the tossing, blooming, perfumed grass. The natural flowers are swept away by the wheat. So this is farming, and this is mass farming, and this is westernization and modernity. And it's so quick. And you can see it. You can see the eastern states, which are founded originally, and then kind of like the expansion and rise of technology and modernity, and how the West was one steel train tracks going across, creating much wider control of great swathes of this territory. And the buffaloes of the spring left us long ago. They didn't really leave, they were slaughtered, left us long ago. There's a sadness, there's a forlornness in that short alliterative line split by the caesura that heightens the effect of the silence where they once were. They gore no more, they bellow no more. The use of assonance, those long, big, drawn-out vowel sounds that kind of connote the vastness and might of the old buffalo, they trundle around the hills no more. Really good verb choice to give you the sense of that massive animal bellowing around. But it's no more. And very final, there's a colon, hyphen, not just them, with the Blackfeet lying low, with the Pawnees lying low, lying low, lying low, physically lying low. It's the last line of that. Now, lying low, perhaps they might come back again. Perhaps there's still a shred of hope, but I think it's very sad. This is a very nostalgic poem of the things that have been lost by the rampant progress of Western civilization upon the American West. Okay.